Hey legends, and welcome back to the Sim Racing channel, where we finally have an excuse to cover our favourite sim. The massive news over in rFactor 2 land has been the announcement of them hosting the virtual 24 Hours Le Mans, combined with finally licensing Ferrari cars, namely the 488 GT3 and GTE. Today is an awesome day because the GTE car got released. Ever since the 488 GT3 came out in Assetto Corsa Competizione, it's become my favourite GT car, and now it's also come to my favourite racing simulator. I'll have to rein myself in here because I'm so excited I could just babble about this for hours. So instead of doing that, let's just load up a race and talk through how it all feels and what you guys can expect for buying this car. If you want to keep up to date with future RF2 releases and news such as the GT3 car, be sure to smash the sub as we'll inevitably cover that in time too. In fact, I'm considering a direct comparison between the RF2 and ACC 488 GT3s across identical tracks so we can really put these games up against each other. Let me know if that's something that interests you guys down below. So without further ado, let's go drive this thing. Alright, surprise, surprise, I bet you thought we were going to do this at Le Mans. We might later, but for now we're actually going to test this car out at Sebring for a number of reasons, first of which being, well, this track is freaking awesome. It's a really great place to test out cars for the first time because the track surface is so bumpy. You really get a feel for the aerodynamic profile, the way the suspension is set up. And also I've been driving Sebring a lot lately as part of our Metal Moro AJR tests, testing out the rFactor 2 physics engine over the last little while, trying to see if there really are any kind of broken physics elements going on. And one of the things that we'll delve into in this car is, can you break the setup in the way that you can many of the other cars? Can you drive it around with a completely loose rear wing and a detached rear sway bar with minimum tire pressures and gain a ton of time? But until then, let's just go over the car itself. So, as you would expect from a Ferrari, it sounds phenomenal. It's one of the best sounding cars in rFactor, easily. Force feedback is commensurate with what you would expect from rFactor. It feels great. It's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like ACC's GT3 version of this car, except with extra road detail. As you would kind of expect from this engine, it's a bit more detail oriented. The default setup I don't like too much, which is exactly why I've loaded it up at defaults to show you guys what the car handles like with the way it comes out of the box. So it's not going too bad. The car feels relatively responsive and nice, but they have made some very strange, or what I would consider to be fairly strange, setup tweaks on it. So as you can see, there's mid-corner understeer. Sometimes there's corner entry understeer as well. Occasionally followed by corner exit oversteer. Now the car itself, based on the few laps that I've done on this track already, is, at least for my driving style, easily the quickest GTE car in the game. Easily. You can see the instability there. And we'll get into that in a second. This is one of the reasons I love testing new cars on Sebring. You get to find out exactly what the aero profile is like, exactly how the suspension geometry is acting under certain circumstances. Like here, very easy to spin with the... Yep, there we go. Just kind of a strange behavior from the car there. Couldn't actually get it to pivot in with trail braking, and then as soon as I let off, the car just kind of sprung out on me. So I'm having to restrain... Yep. It just kind of wants to slip out on you now, especially as the tires heat up. So, as per usual, S397 haven't given us the most phenomenal default setup, but you can tell by driving this car, not only is it mega fun and the potential is there, but that you can get some insane times out of this thing once you do tune it correctly. So I'm going to try and finish this lap, hopefully without binning the car, so we can get just a rough lap time, so we can get an idea of where we sit with the setup. Yep. Is that coming off the brakes, the car just understeers too much, and then as soon as it goes mid-corner, it just kind of wants to snap out on you. It's a bit of a weird one. It's just sort of teetering between the edge of over and understeer, but without feeling neutral at any point. It's kind of jumping between the two states a bit much for me personally. I can show you guys why that is based on the setup when we get into it. Now, I knew that everybody else that tests this car out is going to do it at Le Mans because there's the virtual Le Mans race coming up in a few days, which is why this pack is being released now. Hopefully with the GT3 variants of the car following shortly. Alright, don't spin on me. This is the place. Make or break. I think maybe second gear in this car. Get some extra torque to pull you through. Alright, rough lap time. Let's see where we're at.
The lap is a 2:01.03.
Cool, not phenomenal. Let's get into the setup and see where we're at. Okay, here we are in the setup screen. Now, one thing I can say is I tried to very quickly break the setup of this car as I've been able to break the other ones like the Metal Moro, some of the other GT3s, like minimum camber, lowest tire pressures, basically no rear wing, and using the rear sway bar to balance it out. I haven't actually been able to do this in the Ferrari so far, which is so heartening and it's so great. It might mean that there isn't some fundamental flaw in the rFactor 2 physics engine. Maybe there's just some flaw in the way some of those earlier cars have been rendered. So this car we can actually move about setting up as we would a normal race car. So I've only had a short amount of time to play with this. I can't give you the setup of the gods, as it were, but I can give you some pointers in the right direction. So rear wing, down 1. Coast is too high. I don't even know how you can get 110% of axle lock. I don't even know how that's a thing. So the reason we're lowering this is to help the wheels rotate independently of each other when we're off power. It's going to help the car turn in mid-corner. If you remember me saying that the car had this strange tendency to understeer mid-corner, that's what the coast differential setting helps with. The other one is radiator tape. We can block off the radiator slightly to get us some extra time. 75 is a bit ambitious, but we'll give it a go. Engine mixture on qualification to give us a bit of extra power. Now, this is the big one. I don't know why they made the suspension harder on the rear than the front, but I've not seen a Ferrari set up that way anywhere else. And I kind of use my Assetto Corsa Competizione settings of the 488 as a baseline for this, so completely different, right? This goes all the way back to 120. This goes up to 160. What having heavier suspension on the front is going to do is change the aerodynamic balance and increase the car's stability at speed. Very, very important. So we're going to do more slow bump. That's going to give the car extra stability under braking, which is much needed. Slow rebound, I think, was okay at defaults. Now, the fast bump and rebound in ACC were far lower, which is why I experimented with having them far lower at first. What that essentially does is more neutrally absorb all the bumps on a bumpy circuit like Sebring. Looking at the rear, I dropped the slow bump by 1, which gives the car extra squat into acceleration, meaning it's less likely to spin out on us under power, which is great. This all allows us to neutralize the torque, which means less scrubbing of the tires. Now, we might drop these little things one more time. That should do it for now. Mind you, these are just rough approximate settings. I've only had about a half hour to play with this so far, so I really wanted to get this video out for you guys on time. We can get into a full detailed setup. I'll start exploring the nooks and crannies of this car and the GT3 more and more over time. As you guys know, I'm OCD about this sort of stuff. I'll definitely get in there and make stuff happen, and I will share the findings with you in time. So, as always, in rFactor 2, the tire pressure's at minimum. Unfortunately, that's an ongoing quote-unquote hack in the physics engine. We can drop the TC by 1 point. We could possibly drop it by another point. I'm not entirely sure yet. Again, I need to feel out the extremes of all of this. And with the camber, usually I would keep it... You would go around about here and here. If you were setting it up commensurate with ACC, that's roughly where you'd have things. I might go a little bit less. The car has a bit of an extra tendency to step out on you in this game, or at the very least I haven't balanced that out with other setup tweaks. But in a perfect world, you would probably be running a touch, just a touch more camber than this on the Ferrari. Anyway, that should give us a good baseline. So I think we had a 201, and let's see what we can get with this new setup. Alright, so coming down the final straight here, I can already say that it's a bit more of a stable aerodynamic platform than it was at stock. As you can see, I came in way too hot there. The car's still okay. Very honest through there. Moment of truth is going to be T1. Sebring's first corner is one of the best corners in all of motor racing. It's like a Combination of trepidation and dread every time you come up to it. Can you do it? Can it be done? Yes, it can. Yes, yes, it can. Use the entire track, run off and all. All right, now we're getting into the business. Now we're really driving Sebring. So these settings for the car make so much more sense with what I know of the Ferrari. Way more stable. Suspension makes so much more sense. It feels quicker. Whether or not it is, I guess we'll find out at the end of this lap, assuming I don't bin it. And I hope I don't. It started off decently well so far. You might ask, why yellow Ferrari? Why not the full livery? And the answer is, the game decided this for me. I actually chose the red one. I figured that would be the most commensurate with what you guys would expect from Ferrari, but the game was like, nope, you're gonna load with the yellow livery, Erman. So, yellow it is. Still looks pretty good though, right? I gotta say, I've had to kind of hold back a little bit, train myself over the last half hour, because I've been driving prototypes on this track, and it's a very different experience. You have so much more grip with the prototypes. But in terms of like the GTE experience, I've never had such an easy run through Sebring as I have with the Ferrari 488. I love this car with this track, once it's set up well, that is. Alright, key is don't cut too much there. I've been disqualified due to track limits a few times. As long as we don't bin it on this penultimate corner, possibly the most difficult on the entire track, we should be okay. Let's see how we go. Brake at the line, down to third, second maybe? Let's try second. Yeah, nice, more torque. Let's push it through the apex. Oh, I love it. Alright, that's the way. That's the way. What have we gained?
The lap was a 1:58.67.
Yeah. Alright, that'd be it. Oh man, what's that? That's 2.5 seconds again, based on setup, right? So you guys remember my Metal Moro video? So, I'm gonna make this a running theme. I need you guys to see how important car setups are. So same drivers, same car, literally 2 laps apart, 2.5 seconds apart. I mean, how do you argue with that? That being said, I've got to thank Studio 397. Their default setups always leave a lot to be desired. It's almost like they don't like the people that are driving their cars. It's almost like they want you to lose or not experience the full joy of what the car can be. So, if you're racing at Sebring, possibly even Le Mans, give these settings a shot. I think you'll enjoy the car a lot more and you'll feel more validated about your purchase. On the whole, huge potential. I love this car. For me, it's the quickest I've ever driven a GTE car around Sebring consistently, so I'm loving it. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we'll move on to Le Mans, maybe we won't. I don't want this video to get long in the tooth, and I know that every other guy who's doing these videos is going to do this at Le Mans, but maybe we'll see if we can get a lap out there and see how it all feels and how things may come together during the virtual Le Mans Championship. Okay, here we are at Le Mans. So, I think in the last Sebring video I got a little bit carried away talking about setups and esoteric stuff like that. This time we're just going to go over how the car feels. Nothing so much about the setup, but more about what it is that you'll get from this, how it may stack up to the rest of the cars, and all that fun stuff. So, one of the cool things about Le Mans is that there's a bunch of straights where we can just kind of relax a little bit more than Sebring and actually talk about what the car is like. So the very first impression you get from the car is obviously through the force feedback. Or perhaps before that, the sound. So sound-wise, I mean, it's one of my favorite sounding cars in the game. That's about all there is to say about it. I mean, I love the sound of the 488. I've loved it ever since I first heard it in Assetto Corsa Competizione. This car, in this game, brings a little bit of that vibe, which is lovely. The other thing is the force feedback. Now, after driving the Reza cars, I've got to say that the force feedback in this car makes so much more sense. There's a much more natural centering force, like a self-aligning torque force. When you apply load to the rear wheels, the steering wheel wants to center itself, unlike the Metal Moro, which is just a very odd feeling car. It's a shame the Reza didn't update that to fix those issues, but anyway, 488 feels amazing. The force feedback as a whole, and I'm on the wrong side of the track. The force feedback as a whole feels a lot more together, a lot tighter. The damping feels more correct in respect to the levels of the road details. Now, one thing you've probably picked up on already is Le Mans is a track I don't drive very often. It's a track that I only ever drove at length in prototype style cars and the Senna. So driving it in a GTE is an altogether new experience for me. I'm not used to lacking the downforce to take the corners at a speed that I'm comfortable with. So I'm just gonna have to try and take it easy here. Hopefully not bin the car as we're talking about all this. It also needs, not to get too deep into the setups again, but it needs a slightly different setup to what I have on the car in order to feel aerodynamically stable at these speeds. But that being said, yeah, being a rally guy, being from that kind of a background, Le Mans, and I'm sorry if this is an affront to you endurance racing guys, I've never really liked this track. I find it kind of boring personally. It's the one 24-hour race I really don't get into all that much. I far prefer Spa and the Nürburgring myself. Don't take that personally, it's just my personal preference. That being said, this track is modeled amazingly by S397. I love it just because of the quality of the track itself, so I still drive it from time to time. The car seems very well situated on it. It seems very well suited to the track, and I can see a lot of people wanting to drive this in the esports and league communities, because to me it feels like potentially the quickest GTE car currently in the game. Now, more apologies on my behalf. I am nowhere near close to any kind of a limit on this track. I'm simply just trying to keep it on the track. For whatever that's worth. But what else is to say? If I were to criticize this update, I mean, obviously there are a few things. The default setup is strange as per usual. I guess that's standard fare for us rFactor fans, isn't it? You kind of just come to expect it now. The other thing is, I wish the heads-up display on this car actually showed you more things, like that the TC blipped when you lost traction. I wish that, for instance, you actually had some of the tire pressure readouts on there, you know, the kind of things you would come to expect after playing something like ACC. So I did briefly compare the 48 GT3 and this 48 GTE between ACC and rFactor 2, and, you know, as a whole, they feel relatively similar. I mean, but other than the obvious differences between the driving models in the two games, the cars, it feels like you're driving the same car. So props to both developers on account of that. I can't wait for the actual GT3 version to come out so I can compare that between both games directly. Let me know if you guys want to see that, actually, a direct comparison between ACC and rFactor 2. Same track, same car, Ferrari 48 GT3. I'm kind of excited about potentially doing that. And I would hope that, if anything, you know by this point is that I attempt to be as fair and impartial as possible, despite my obvious bias towards the driving model of rFactor. I have revealed some very odd bugs in its physics engine in the past. Bugs which this car doesn't seem as susceptible to, which again I'm very excited about. I am going to probe the setup potential of this car at length over the coming weeks, so if something comes to fruition and the car seems a little bit wonky, like we're running no rear wing or minimum camber and no toe and it's still driving fine, then yeah, there's going to be an issue with that, obviously. But so far, the setup parameters for this car in terms of speedy setups are kind of commensurate with what you would expect with a 488, which is really exciting. Not commensurate with the kind of professional driving you expect on this track. Again, I apologize, I don't drive this track. But I hope that roundabout covers it. I mean, it sounds amazing. We're in the red one now, so enjoy. Ferrari Red looks great, I think. The default FOV is really good, so it just kind of shows you the dash. So much closer to what you would expect from a game like ACC out of the box. Default setup has a ways to go, as per usual. You can see it's exhibiting some low-speed understeer characteristics there, or mid-speed understeer characteristics. So again, the setup is going to be a big one with this, as it is with all rFactor cars, for it to truly feel its best. If you're wondering at this point, why doesn't this guy race against AI? Why does he keep lapping by himself and talking at me? It's because I don't particularly like the AI in rFactor 2. I don't think they race you particularly well. I don't think it's commensurate with what you'd expect from people in real life. And it kind of just annoys me for the most part. So I find it much easier to just kind of compare the track to the car surface, compare the car to the track surface, and talk about how things interplay from a field perspective, so what you might expect as a driver when you first load this up. So, I think I've ranted long enough. If there's anything I've missed, do let me know down below. If there's anything else you want to see, any other comparisons or whatever, again, do let me know. And thank you guys for joining me. I'm really glad I get to cover some content for once in my favorite simulator. For as long as it remains my favorite simulator, maybe AMS2 will have something to say about that in the coming weeks. But I'm loving this. I don't regret my purchase, so around about $8 AUD. You know, for you guys, it depends. Like, it depends how you get along with this sales model that 397 have been using. I understand from their perspective why they might have to do this in order to maintain a profitable company. But, you know, beyond that, I can completely understand if you don't enjoy paying this much money on a per car and a per track basis. That's entirely valid. So really up to you guys. For me, it's worth it. I would say, I would hope that for you would also be worth it. Nice work, Herman. Legendary lines. And yeah, I mean, I hope this has been somewhat insightful for you guys. My apologies for getting too carried away with the setup talk and Sebring. I get very excited about things like that. And my apologies for the woeful lines through Le Mans. But I will work on this in the coming weeks as I drive this car and tweak it and find its parameters more and more and more. So if you guys enjoyed that, be sure to smash...
8.50.
Thanks, race engineer. Always love being talked over. So if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to smash the subscribe and join us for all future sim racing news and reviews. And of course, a closer look at rFactor over the coming days as they release more Ferrari content. And again, if you guys want to see a direct comparison of the ACC GT3 Ferrari and the rFactor 2 GT3 Ferrari on identical tracks, let me know. That might be a really exciting comparison to do. And again, I'll do my very best to be as fair and impartial as humanly possible. So, until next time, we'll be seeing you guys later.